First contact between species was typically a carefully orchestrated affair. Most civilizations put tremendous effort into presenting themselves in the best possible light when meeting another species for the first time. Every word, gesture, and image was meticulously planned, knowing they would be recorded for historical purposes. This approach worked well when both species were aware of each other's existence and had time to prepare diplomatic fleets with the right representatives in the right place. But sometimes, things didn't go according to plan. Sometimes, the wrong individuals ended up making first contact. Sometimes, the best representatives weren't present. And sometimes, those who stepped forward to greet their new neighbors weren't diplomats at all, but carried a much darker message. Captain Devoros hated being so close to the Cavia Nebula. The swirling mist and the rumors about what lurked within sent shivers down his spine. Throughout his career, he had witnessed too many inexplicable things to dismiss the legends entirely. The Germo traders could venture into the nebula all they wanted, but Devoros preferred to keep his distance. Unfortunately for him, he had been given the distinguished honor of commanding Crown Prince Thulaim's ship. The Nuvian Rose was the finest vessel in the kingdom's fleet, a perfect blend of firepower, armor, and luxury. It was an excellent ship with one significant problem. When the Crown Prince was aboard, he gave the orders, and the young prince, eager for adventure, wanted to see the nebula. Devoros had managed to convince the prince to bring a small flotilla along, but the only available vessels at Lorison Port were patrol craft, adequate for deterring smugglers and the occasional pirate, but not what the captain would have preferred when venturing near the dreaded nebula. He would have felt much safer with several heavy cruisers. "Are you satisfied now?" Devoros asked, glancing at the prince. The prince, a decent-looking young man who resembled his mother more than his father, smirked. "It's quite fascinating, and you say dead ships and ghosts inhabit it?" "Some sailors believe such tales," Devoros replied, not mentioning that he was among them. "But as you can see, it's merely mist, nothing more, though it does interfere with our sensors. Now, if your curiosity is satisfied, perhaps we could return to Lorison." "Why leave so soon, Captain?" "Nervous," the prince grinned. Before Devoros could respond, Lieutenant Halves spoke up. "Sir, 3 signatures are coming into range." "Supply ships from Lorison?" the captain asked, though a chill ran down his spine. "No, sir. They're coming from the nebula." Devoros leaned forward, gripping the bridge railing as he peered into the cloud. Slowly, the vessels emerged, wisps of nebula stretching around them like desperate fingers trying to pull the ships back into the mist. "They don't match any known signatures," Halves reported. "And that middle ship, it's—" He trailed off as Devoros examined the hulk. The captain couldn't believe its size. Twice as large as the King's Might, the largest battleship their kingdom had ever built. All 3 ships appeared damaged, their hulls bearing scars from past battles, but showed no lights, banners, or identifying marks. "Open a hailing channel," Devoros ordered. He pressed the communication button. "Attention unknown vessels. This is Captain Devoros of the Nuvian Rose, flagship of Crown Prince Thulaim, eldest son of King Thin, ruler of the Desvian Kingdom. Identify yourselves immediately." When no response came, Halves reported, "Sir, no response, but I'm detecting weapons powering up." Devoros tried again. "Unknown vessels, stand down immediately. We are backed by the full might of the Desvian Kingdom. Do you understand?" "Sir, I'm receiving something," Halves said. "It's very faint." "Play it," Devoros commanded. As the sound filled the bridge, Devoros's blood ran cold. It was laughter, not joyful, but deep, rasping, and sinister. "Shields!" he yelled, just as the central vessel fired. A plasma bolt larger than any Devoros had ever seen struck the light destroyer Joe's Blessing. The ship buckled and ruptured from the single shot, transforming 50 crew members into a fireball. "General quarters, sound the alarm. Shields up, weapons firing." Devoros shouted as the crew rushed to their stations. The mysterious vessels advanced, finally pulling away from the nebula's misty tendrils. "Sir, more readings," Havs reported. "They're launching small vessels." "What?" Devoros exclaimed, never having heard of ships carrying their own light craft. "Fighters? Bombers?" I don't know, sir." The Rose began to maneuver, trying to bring its broadside weapons to bear. Meanwhile, the Jester's flak cannons spewed fire at the oncoming craft. The initial wave of small vessels exploded under the barrage, but the rest kept coming, making only minor course adjustments. When Devoros saw them slam into the sides of the Jester and the Trident, he realized what they were. "Boarding vessels! Who uses boarding vessels? Alert the Marines!" Devoros suddenly remembered that the prince was still on the bridge, frozen in place as he stared at the unfolding battle. "Your Highness, please get to the command bunker in the middle of the ship," he urged. When the prince didn't move, Devoros muttered, "Heavens curse ye! Helmsman, get the Rose out of here! Full power to the engines!" "We're running?" The prince finally spoke, startled. "Aye, we're running. Havs, the helm is yours." Devoros grabbed the prince by the arm and left the bridge. Royal guards immediately formed around them. Devoros nodded to the Marine captain. "We need to get him to the yacht. It should outrun the attackers." "But why are we running?" the prince demanded. "The kingdom does not run. The royal family are not cowards." "Boy, that damn ship destroyed a light destroyer with a single shot. It's bigger than anything I've ever seen, and it came out of the cursed nebula. Our job now is to get you to safety." Devoros quickened his pace to a light jog, the royal guard moving around him and the prince. The metals on his uniform clinked as they ran. He hadn't been expecting a battle today. The ship suddenly rocked, causing Devoros to stumble. The prince fell, and the captain helped him up. "The engines are hit!" Havs's panicked voice announced over the ship's comm. "We need fire teams to the engineering bay." More jolts followed, though less intense. "Boarders detected! All hands, repel boarders!" "Come on, lads," Devoros urged, ignoring his shortness of breath as they headed toward the ship's private hangar. As they reached the corridor, they heard an explosion followed by screaming. The hangar was overrun with boarding vessels, and swarms of unknown assailants charged the Marines. Strangely, the attackers wielded swords, actual metal blades dripping with blood. They didn't take cover from energy bolts, they simply charged ahead. For every attacker a Marine took down, 2 more leaped forward, driving their blades into Devoros's men. "The hangar is lost," Devoros declared. "To the escape pods." The group turned and ran toward the ship's spine. When they reached the nearest escape pod station, they found bodies strewn about and sailors trying to pry open a pod door. Inside, a crewman pounded desperately on the glass, trapped as fire consumed the pod. "What happened?" Devoros asked. "Some of the prince's guests tried to escape in the pods," a sailor explained. "The attackers just blew them up. None got out. The controls are locked now." Devoros cursed and turned away, unable to spare time for the burning sailor. "To the bunker! A distress call must be out by now. Maybe the bunker will hold long enough." The Royal Guard ran ahead, and Devoros, though in good shape for his age, struggled to keep pace. The guards had just reached the junction before the bunker when a feral, terrifying yell echoed through the halls. The attackers charged toward the guards, who dropped to their knees and aimed their rifles, firing down the corridors to hold off the boarders. Devoros grabbed the prince and dragged him down the only safe passageway toward the bunker. The massive vault-like door stood open before them. Behind them, the guards began to fall one by one, overwhelmed by the attackers. The guard captain sprinted past Devoros, scooped up the prince, and bodily carried him into the secure room. As the captain began to push the door shut, Devoros desperately entered the code to lock it. There was no time for him to get inside. The door closed with a heavy thunk as the locks engaged, and Devoros momentarily sighed with relief. Then he heard the yell again and looked down the hall. The last of the guards lay on the ground, throat opened by an attacker's blade. Only Devoros and the guard captain remained. Devoros fired his pistol at the advancing attackers, dodging as metal slugs, who still used slug throwers, echoed through the chamber. The guard captain pulled a temporal wall charge from his belt and slammed it into the floor. An ethereal green wall rose to fill the corridor. The bullets slammed into it and stopped. As the attackers pushed through the field, they were slowed, making them easy targets for Devoros and the guard captain. The attackers paused, testing the wall. Devoros studied their forms. Unlike any species he knew. He recalled a conversation with a Germo captain who had visited his ship. The captain had spoken of a new species that didn't just hide in or travel through the nebula, but actually lived within the cursed mist. A species both barbaric and sophisticated at once. Judging by the size of their ship yet the primitive weapons they used, Devoros wagered these were the same beings. What did they call themselves? Ah, yes, humans. 3 attackers suddenly surged through the temporal wall together. Devoros and the guard captain fired, killing them easily as they emerged. But as the bodies fell, one of the humans opened its hand, dropping a red and white sphere onto the deck. "Look out!" Devoros shouted, but it was too late. The explosion knocked him back, and everything went black. When Devoros regained consciousness, pain radiated throughout his body, his head, chest, and face. Opening his eyes, he found himself on his knees, his head lolling. Something pushed him back down when he tried to move. His hands were bound behind his back, and he was being held in position by one of the humans. A metal splinter was lodged in his chest, and blood dripped from the wound. His lips felt blistered and cut. The guard captain knelt before him in a similar state. Devoros wondered what the humans were waiting for. Then he heard footsteps echoing down the hall. Steady, methodical, threatening. A very deliberate clack, clack, clack. A figure appeared with long crimson hair, wearing battered and dented metal armor. By the curves, Devoros assumed the human was female. She grinned as she clutched a long cutlass in one hand, blood dripping from its tip. Ominous black smoke seemed to follow her, as if she were one of Grimm's angels sent from the black caverns to drag him to hell. She stood before them, seemingly towering impossibly tall. She looked between Devoros and the guard captain, before pointing her sword at the guard. "What's the code to the vault?" The guard spat a mouthful of blood onto her armor. Devoros watched in horror as the woman reached up with her free hand, wiped some blood onto her fingers, and delicately licked them clean. Tastes rather nice. Sort of a kick to it, she mused, examining her bloodied fingers. With her other hand, she drove her sword into the guard's throat. Devoros turned away as the guard gurgled his last breath and collapsed in a growing puddle of blood. Devoros hadn't felt true fear in a long time, but he felt it now. Was this really a living species, or was she truly one of Grimm's angels sent to drag him to the abyss? "The code!" she demanded. Devoros struggled to breathe and summon his courage. Finally, he looked her in the eye. "I'll never talk." He expected a swift end, but to his despair he saw a gleam in her eyes that nearly made him soil himself. Tsk, tisk. Never is such a long time. Instead of using her blade, her fist came down and everything went black once more. When the nearest fleet responded to the distress call, they found the remains of the flotilla empty and devoid of life. Weapons and parts had been stripped from the shattered husks that were once ships. Nothing alive remained aboard, only bloodstains and bodies. The central bunker on the Rose had been ripped free from the heart of the ship. The only clue left? Behind was an image painted on the hull with the blood of the slain, a grinning skull atop 2 crossed swords. The fleet of the damned had retreated into the nebula after their engagement with the Desvian fleet. It seemed like fate that when they finally reached the edge of the nebula, they had encountered a fleet rich for the taking. There had been no thoughts of diplomacy when they heard the announcement that the flagship belonged to a crown prince. Now they had salvaged more weapons in a single haul than they'd managed in years. Junko Takano had been assigning new weapons while simultaneously organizing the prisoners brought back from the rows. Now that the prisoners were assembled and ready, she needed to prepare them before her boss arrived to address them. Junko stood on the balcony of the flight control tower, looking down into the main hangar of the Retribution at the masked prisoners being guarded below. Only half of the Rose's crew had been taken prisoner, the rest had been killed in the fighting. Junko was somewhat surprised by the high casualty rate and intended to determine whether it had been caused by the aliens' refusal to surrender or simply confusion about how to do so. This hadn't been the Retribution's first contact with another species, but it was by far the bloodiest. The shortage of translators likely hadn't helped. Brushing a hand through her short black hair to neaten it, Junko checked her sharply pressed gray and blue business suit and tugged the hem of her skirt to ensure it was even. Taking a deep breath, she walked forward onto the balcony and tapped the microphone. The 20,000 or so prisoners looked up, their murmuring fading to silence. "Crew of the Rose," she began, noticing the translator activate in the corner of her. She tried again. "Crew of the Rose, my name is Junko Takano. You are prisoners aboard the Retribution, and I'm sure many of you are worried about what will happen next. That will be addressed shortly. I am here to introduce Baroness Andromeda Subuv, commander of this ship and the entire fleet of the damned." Junko stepped back as her boss strode forward. Andromeda approached the edge of the balcony with a big grin on her face. Cameras broadcast her image onto massive screens throughout the hangar and the rest of the ship. Her black, crimson, and gold power armor made her an imposing figure, especially with the miniature smoke generators built into the back that produced a steady stream of ominous black smoke. For a moment, Andromeda simply stood there, letting the prisoners get a good look at her menacing grin before speaking in their language with the help of a translator. "Listen up, because this will be the last time any of you hear me speaking in your language," she began. "There's something you need to understand. Your king won't spend a single ingot for your lives. Your navy won't rescue you. They're likely telling your families you're already dead. You are completely worthless to me as prisoners." She paused, looking around at the crowd. "So I'm going to give you two choices. On one hand, you can remain worthless slaves to a king who doesn't care about you and a navy that would rather kill you than fight for you, and ask to be dropped off on the next planet we find." Junko was always impressed by how well this speech worked when they captured large groups of prisoners, especially aliens. These beings had just been ruthlessly attacked and had likely seen many friends and relatives die. She never would have expected such tactics to work, yet she'd seen them succeed before and was curious if they would again. The approach sounded awful to her, but she was merely a secretary, not a military commander. Andromeda continued, "Or you can start caring about your lives and do something meaningful. I'm a pirate. This ship is crewed by pirates. This fleet consists of pirates. Do you know what we do? Some of you might think we steal and kill, which is true, but more importantly, we fight for freedom. In a galaxy where every insignificant person with power tries to rule your life and turn you into slaves to law, wage, or culture, we fight against it. From what I know of your culture, you're all enlisted because you were born to the wrong parents. Well, pirates don't believe in classes. If you fight with me, sail with me, and serve with me, then you'll get the same chance as everyone else. In my fleet to get promoted. You spend decades fighting, dying, and slaving away with no hope of promotion, believing a tiny pension at the end is worth it? That's madness. You know what we believe in? We believe in meritocracy, not aristocracy." Junko wasn't sure about that line, considering Andromeda was a baroness. Even so, she knew her boss had a certain charisma. The way she moved when she spoke and emphasized her words with various gestures had power. It was effective with common sailors. She'd seen Andromeda convince many human crews to abandon their old allegiances and join the fleet of the damned. But this time, Junko wasn't focusing on her boss. She was watching the prisoners. It was impossible to read their facial expressions from this distance, but she noted their body language. Some had begun whispering to one another as Andromeda continued. "Your officers have told me about the great riches they obtain every time you go to battle. They enjoy the spoils of war, titles of authority, land, and riches. What do you get? A pat on the back? A little ribbon to commemorate the event? Well, pirates all get a share of the bounty. We captured a few hundred rich brats belonging to your kingdom's wealthiest families, and they're going to pay dearly for their children's safe return. Everyone in my fleet will receive a share of that." Junko knew Andromeda hadn't spoken to any prisoners except the captain of the Rose, but judging by the sailors' murmurs, her claims must have sounded accurate. After pacing back and forth, Andromeda continued, "That can include you. I'm inviting every single one of you to join my crew. I won't lie, there will be challenges. You'll have to learn our language quickly. You won't be safe because we're always in the thick of battle, and you'll be taking orders from officers of other species. But that's only until some of your own become officers themselves. And you know what? You can leave at any port we dock at. You won't be bound by some 30-year contract like your Navy forces on you. Sail with us for a year. Make enough money to buy a home for you and yours, then leave. Any of my crew are free to go any time." Junko glanced at her boss, who always got a special fire in her eyes when she mentioned the next part. "But most of them have been with me for over 10 years. Want to know why they've stayed so long, besides the riches they've gained? They believe in freedom. One day, this fleet will find a rock good enough to call home, and then we'll establish a nation truly dedicated to freedom. No kings, no nobles, no aristocratic bastards getting rich off your blood and sweat." Junko watched the prisoners shift and nod. She couldn't be entirely sure of the aliens' body language, but they seemed to be responding to the speech. "So what are you going to do?" Andromeda bellowed. "Go back to your life as a ship slave or free yourself? Break your back for a pittance, or fight with us for your share of the riches? How many of you are ready to fight? How many of you are ready to experience freedom? Are you with me?" Many of the aliens began to cheer. "If you're with me, then you." "Need to make more noise than that," I said. "Are you with me?" The cheering grew louder as Andromeda grinned. "Good. Those who aren't brave enough to take control of your lives, tell your guard you'd rather be dropped off on the next rock and pray. Your Navy doesn't execute you for surrendering. But the rest of you will follow me to riches and freedom." She raised her cutlass as the aliens cheered below. By Junko's observation, about 3/4 of the prisoners were shouting, cheering, and pushing toward the front, while the remaining quarter stayed back, considerably less enthused. Junko typed a quick command into her tablet and watched the guards move to separate those who weren't cheering from the rest. Soon, the approximately 15,000 new recruits would be processed. Some would join the gunners, some would work in maintenance and tech, but most would likely end up in boarding parties. She wasn't sure how useful the Desvians would be in battle, but they would find out. This wouldn't be the first time they had mass-conscripted aliens into their crew. It would take time to overcome the language barrier, but she had faith that the rest of the crew would either bring them up to speed or launch them out the nearest airlock. Shaking her head slightly to clear her thoughts, Junko followed Andromeda as she left the balcony and entered the hangar control room. "An excellent speech as always, sir. I estimate 15,000 converts. Since we only lost 2,000 in the attack, that's quite a net gain." Andromeda cast a sidelong look at Junko, who quickly added a final "sir." Once in the control room, Junko reached up to turn off the smoke dispensers on the back of Andromeda's armor. Around them stood Andromeda's lifeguards, 7 of the most dedicated men and women in the fleet of the damned, plus a single alien. Named Crag, he was some sort of rock species and had been with the fleet long before Junko arrived. Junko had tried to learn more about him, but those who would speak didn't know anything, and those who knew wouldn't speak. One thing was certain. Every guard would sacrifice their own children before allowing harm to come to Andromeda. How the pirate created such fanatic devotion remained mysterious to Junko. Hers was a life of reason and logic, so seeing others completely controlled by emotion and rhetoric confused her, though she couldn't deny its effectiveness. They were especially ready to follow, Andromeda remarked. You heard what the turtles said about them. Conscripted at a young age and forced into service in their navy and army for decades. That just makes my job easier. She turned to Junko. Now then, have the prisoners who didn't accept my offer diverted to cargo room 172. Junko raised an eyebrow at the unusual request, but quickly typed out the commands. She had learned early on never to question a direct order until after it was carried out. Is the Desvian captain in the observation room as I ordered? Andromeda asked. Junko checked her tablet. Yes, sir. It seems Cookie is almost done treating him as well, sir. Junko now had a terrible suspicion about why the prisoners were being funneled into an outer cargo bay connected to that particular observation deck. She had wondered why the prisoner wasn't taken to the med bay if Andromeda considered him so valuable. Well then, Andromeda said with a grin. Let's find out what's in that vault. As Andromeda and her lifeguards started walking, their power armor allowed them to take long, quick strides, forcing Junko to jog alongside to keep up. This was why she always wore flat shoes. When she'd first learned that Andromeda had ordered a special suit of power armor with heels, she thought the pirate was insane. But then she'd seen how imposing Andromeda appeared walking down a hallway filled with black smoke. As much as Junko found it crazy, Andromeda understood people better than most psychologists or sociologists. Her ability to quickly adapt her speeches and tactics when dealing with various alien species was impressive. Junko constantly reminded herself that just because her boss was psychotic, dangerous, and violent didn't mean she was stupid. If anything, her intelligence might be enhanced by her insanity. She had no one to discuss this theory with, however, as any suggestion that Andromeda was crazy would likely result in Junko's swift execution. As they traversed the massive halls of the ship, Junko wondered about her own importance to the pirate. She couldn't inspire people or fight effectively. All she did was organize, but she might be the only person in the fleet capable of such a task. Andromeda often told Junko how much she valued her, which still seemed strange. Feeling especially curious and courageous, Junko began to speak but lost her nerve at the last moment. It's always impressive how many converts you get with those speeches, sir. But I'm still shocked by how effective they are. The idea of fighting for the people who just took me prisoner seems absurd. That's because you're a completely different kind of person, Junko, Andromeda replied as they continued walking, her voice tinged with amusement. Andromeda's offer to the common sailors was generous by pirate standards. More money than they could earn legally and the freedom to leave at any port they wished. It was a better arrangement than most navies provided. But for Junko, things were different. You remember our first meeting, don't you? Andromeda asked her secretary. How could Junko forget? The pirate had decapitated her former employer, the provincial governor, right before her eyes. Andromeda had then given Junko two stark options: become her secretary or get tossed out the nearest airlock. Unlike the common sailors who could choose to leave, Junko remained trapped in service to the fearsome pirate captain. I need you more than you need freedom, Andromeda explained matter-of-factly. She painted Junko a picture of what her life would have been without the pirate's intervention. Working for the governor for a few years, climbing the ranks, perhaps settling down with someone nice, a boring but safe existence. Instead, Andromeda offered excitement, wealth beyond imagination, and potential power as the pirate carved out her empire across the stars. You're on the list of top 10 most critical people in this fleet, Andromeda assured her with a hearty pat on the shoulder that sent the smaller woman tumbling to the ground in pain and surprise. I always forget you're not in power armor, Andromeda said, reaching down to haul Junko back to her feet. Junko grimaced, fixed her glasses, and rubbed her throbbing shoulder. She straightened her skirt suit, noticing the lifeguards smirking around her. They always seemed amused when this happened. "I'll make sure Cookie gives you some nice drugs," Andromeda promised before looking up at the nameplate over the door they had stopped beside. "But we're here, so get it together." Inside the observation room for Cargo Bay 172, Cookie was tending to the Desvian captain. The alien was sitting on the edge of a gurney, while pirates in combat harnesses stood guard around the room. Junko observed the Desvian with interest. They were the most human-like aliens they had encountered so far. 2 arms, 2 legs, walking upright. Most Desvian sailors were shorter and stockier than the pirate crew. But this captain was taller, with broad shoulders. Their features reminded Junko of a cat with large triangular furred ears. The captain had reddish fur along his face with black markings on his muzzle and forehead, but curiously had grayish-black hair on his head. His deep brown eyes made her think of dark chocolate. Unlike his crew's short tails, the captain had a bushy striped red and black tail that reminded her of a raccoon. "I like his face," Andromeda said suddenly, surprising everyone in the room. "You removed his translator, right?" she asked Cookie. The chubby man who served as both Andromeda's personal chef and surgeon nodded in confirmation. He had patched up the captain and balanced his pain medication to keep him coherent without excessive suffering. "Junko, you need something too?" Cookie asked, noticing her shifting her sore shoulder. "Yes, please," she replied quietly as Andromeda stepped forward to inspect the nervous Desvian. "Why don't I understand?" the alien asked, looking around the room with worry in his expression. "They removed your translator," Junko explained, activating her own so he could understand her. The Desvian's eyes widened as he reached back to feel the bandage at the base of his neck. Cookie quickly pulled his hands away. "Don't mess with it or you'll tear the stitches," Cookie warned. "I'll get you into the med bay soon to do a better job. You'll be good as new." The alien didn't look comforted, and Andromeda continued examining him closely before turning to Junko. "Come here and touch his face," she instructed without using her translator. "Tell me how it feels." Junko blinked at the strange request, but approached the Desvian, reaching up to gently stroke her fingers along the side of his muzzle. The alien jerked back until Rao, one of Andromeda's lifeguards, held his head in place. "It's incredibly soft," Junko reported, surprised. "Very smooth and silky to the touch." Andromeda considered this information thoughtfully before nodding to Ron, who shoved the captain off the gurney. The Desvian staggered to his feet before Lacey and Fritz pushed him down to his knees before the pirate. Junko squeaked in surprise when Andromeda positioned her directly in front of the kneeling alien. "I don't know why they're doing this," Junko told him through her translator, before realizing that her boss and the guards were comparing the height of his face while kneeling to her standing position. "He's like the perfect height," Andromeda declared with satisfaction. "I like his face. He's got soft fur, and that muzzle looks interesting." She turned to her crew with a stern warning. "No matter what, don't mess up his face," the Desvian asked. Junko what was happening, clearly confused by the exchange. She hesitantly replied that they were measuring his size for later, trying to avoid the actual implications of Andromeda's interest. Andromeda soon waved Junko over as the power-armored pirates dragged the Desvian captain to the observation window. Below, about 5,000 prisoners who had refused to join the pirate crew were assembled in the cargo bay. "That was an interesting vault you were guarding with your personal guard, Captain," Andromeda said, finally using her translator. "Care to save us all some time and tell me what's in it?" The Desvian remained silent as Andromeda turned to look down at him. Now. I already told you that forever is a very long time, especially on my ship. We have all manner of methods to make your time here unpleasant." Junko felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end whenever her boss talked like this. She had witnessed what could happen, As nice as Cookie was to her and the crew, he didn't hesitate to use his scalpel on prisoners. "You think I'm afraid? Of torture?" the Desvian asked with newfound resolve. To Junko's surprise, Andromeda just laughed. "Someone like you? No, I don't think you are. I'm fairly sure men like you wait for moments like this all their lives. You probably relish the thought of sacrificing yourself for some stupid vault." She shook her head. "I just wanted to get your hopes up. I have no intention of torturing you." The Desvian looked confused. "Then what?" He trailed off. "See those sailors down there?" Andromeda gestured to the window. "Those are the living crew members who don't want to serve in my fleet. The other 15,000 are happily being processed to join my crew." "What?" the Desvian gasped. 15,000? There can't possibly be that many." "Yes, I'm actually curious about this." "Myself," Junko interjected. "We've never had this many converts after such a bloody battle. It's especially odd considering we've never encountered your species before. I was wondering what socioeconomic or class-based structure you have that would lead to—" "Junko," Andromeda interrupted, staring at her assistant. "Shut up." "Yes, sir," Junko said quietly, looking down at her feet. After a pause, Andromeda continued. "What I was going to ask you is if you're the sort of man who gets called when the chips are down." The Desvian blinked in confusion. "When fragments are down?" Andromeda groaned in annoyance. The translator program wasn't perfect and needed more exposure to the Desvians to improve. "Are you dependable? The sort of guy who always steps up to—" "The plate?" she clarified. "I used to be that sort of person myself. No matter how dire the situation, I would always step up to the plate." She paused, looking off into the distance. "Until one day I had to smash the plate and jam one of the shards into someone's throat." "Sir?" Junko attempted to correct her. "The plate referred to in that idiom is a baseball plate, not a dinner plate. You're mixing your—" She stopped as she saw the glare her boss was directing her way. "Junko, I've still got shards of that plate around. Want me to jam one into your pretty little throat, too?" Junko gulped heavily and shook her head. "Then do you want to shut up like I told you until I need you again?" Junko nodded quickly without saying another word. "Good," Andromeda said, turning back to the Desvian. "Where was I?" "Right. Are you the kind of person who takes responsibility? Are you the sort of captain who looks out for his men? Because you're the captain of a royal prince's ship, right? That would imply you're trustworthy. But you also didn't order your men to die to the last man while protecting the ship. I was expecting more fanatical devotion from a ship like yours. So I'm thinking you like your men, the common sailors." She waved her arm at the window. "All those men, for example. I've promised to drop them off on the next settled planet we find so they can return to their families or back into your navy. They can keep living even though they turned me down. But I lied a little. It's not just up to them or me, it's also up to you." "Me?" the Desvian asked, giving a worried look at the cargo bay. "Yes, you," Andromeda confirmed with a wicked grin. "This is an exterior cargo bay. That wall opens to the outside. Those sailors down there don't know it, but at any moment I could give the order and they'll be sucked out into the void. They'll gasp for air briefly before their eyes explode out of their skulls." The Desvian cringed and squirmed on his knees as Andromeda made an explosive gesture with her hands. "In general, they'll all die quickly yet horribly, and that all depends on you," she said, poking him in the chest. I can't give you the code," he whispered, his confidence wavering. "Who said I wanted the code? I just want to know what's in—" "The damn thing," Andromeda replied. "And to be fair, I win no matter what. If you tell me to go fuck myself, I kill 5,000 sailors, and then I know it's worth more than all their lives put together. Which means what's inside is insanely valuable. Or you tell me what I want to know, they all live, and I still get what I want." She leaned closer. "But I'm sure you're thinking, I'm a captain too, and I couldn't possibly be that cruel to sailors." "Well, that's fair because you don't know me," Junko, introduce me. Captain, Junko began formally. This is Baroness Andromeda, commander of the Retribution and the entire fleet of the damned. Ah, what's your name, Captain? Andromeda asked. Cassis, Henry Devoros. Baroness Andromeda Suvakov. This is Captain Cassis Henry Devoros. Junko completed the introduction. Andromeda reached down, extending her hand to the Desvian. With confusion and worry, Devoros glanced from the guards behind him to Andromeda. Before reaching up with both hands, Andromeda grabbed only his right hand and shook it. A pleasure to meet you, Captain Devoros. Likewise, Captain Suvakov, he replied, clearly bewildered. Andromeda tugged him to his feet, making him gasp as she effortlessly pulled him up by his arm alone. Once standing, he rubbed his shoulder while Andromeda nodded at Junko. Well, call them in, she ordered. Junko blinked in confusion. Call who in? The other prisoners, of course, Andromeda growled. I don't know what other prisoners. You didn't say anything to me about other prisoners. Andromeda's expression changed from anger to realization. Oh, that's right. You were busy. Slipped my mind. Who did I tell about that? She looked around the room. Titus, commander of her lifeguard, nodded. I took care of it, sir. The door opened as more pirates ushered in about 20 Desvian prisoners. They were taller and skinnier than the crew or the captain, wearing much nicer clothes. Junko quickly realized they must be the aristocrats from the ship. Their impractical attire and abundance of jewelry suggested they weren't military personnel. Their arms were tied behind their backs as they were forced to kneel across from Captain Devoros. Andromeda approached the first prisoner, who had a brownish-black coat. What's your name? I am Juravan Kelin Osto, Lord of Aradin. My father is Earl of Aradin. Yeah, that's nice, Andromeda said dismissively, pulling her sidearm and leveling it at the surprised Desvian's face. Wait, Devoros shouted. You don't need to do that. I get it. You mean every bit of what you say. Lacey and Fritz held Devoros firmly, but he still struggled against their power-armored grip. It's not necessary to demonstrate. Andromeda lowered her weapon as the aristocratic Desvian fainted, flopping onto his side. Good, because if I'm wrong about you liking your common sailors, then that means you should still care about the rich. Kids on your ship. Some of them are probably important. I could walk down this line blowing the back of their heads off without concern, all before jettisoning your crew like trash, and that would tell me all I need to know about that safe. As she spoke, Andromeda paused, looking down the line of prisoners. She walked over to stand before a worried-looking female Desvian with white fur and an exceptionally long, grayish-white tail marked with black spots. Junko, she called. This time, Junko was ready for the command and hurried over to stand very close to the kneeling prisoner. What are you doing? Why is she looking at me like that? The female asked Junko with panic in her voice, just measuring. Nothing to worry about, Junko lied, before Andromeda nodded and pointed at the Desvian. And Kira stepped forward, hauling the female to her feet. She gasped and panicked as they escorted her out the door. Why me? What does she want? Please, I haven't done anything wrong, she cried as the door closed behind them. Andromeda turned back to Devoros. Don't worry, you'll see her again shortly, unharmed. You aren't related to her or anything, are you? The sly grin on her face made Junko shiver, a reaction the Desvian captain noticed. What? No, he answered, thoroughly confused. Good. That will help keep things from being awkward later, Andromeda said. Now then, 20 rich noble brats and 5,000 common sailors. How many of them have to die to get me the information I want? 1, 2, all of them? Should I drag your officers in here too, let you watch as they get carved up piece by piece, organ by organ? She leveled her weapon at the unconscious Desvian she'd first spoken with. No! Devoros exclaimed. He looked away, shoulders slumping in defeat as he stared at the ground. The Crown Prince, he said softly. What about him? He's got the code? He knows what's inside? Andromeda waved her gun across the prisoners, making them gasp and duck. Where is he anyway? I found all his guests, but not him. Ooh, she said as understanding dawned. He's in there. It's not a vault at all, then. It's a panic room of some sort. Right on the flagship of the crown prince of a massive kingdom. The most valuable thing isn't the jewelry, it's the prince. I really should have thought of that sooner. Junko, stop the demo team. Junko quickly typed commands on her tablet to alert the team inspecting what they now knew was a safe room. Shall I start having CS brought in and aid stations set up, sir? Yes, that's fine, Andromeda replied with a dismissive wave. The usual sort of stuff while we wait to drop them off. Devoros looked up. So you'll let them go? Yes, of course. I had every intention of dropping them off on a settled planet. I just wanted to see how valuable that vault was. And now that I know it's not a vault at all, well, that's even better. She holstered her sidearm and gestured. At the prisoners. Get them back to their cells. Unlike the sailors, these are all worth something to their families. Junko checked her tablet as an alert appeared. Sir, they've got the Desvian nav computer working on the bridge. You told me to alert you when it was ready. Then we shall head to the bridge, Andromeda decided. Make sure Captain Stahl and Captain Bloodaxe are there so I can tell them my plans. Oh, and bring, should I keep calling him Captain Devoros? I killed or stole his crew and scrapped his ship. Is he really a captain? Should I just use his first name? She wondered aloud. Sir, Junko explained, he's still a captain in the Desvian Navy, and as such, his rank is independent of the status of his ship. So long as he's a prisoner only, he's still a captain. When he sees the light and joins your crew, he'll cease to be a captain and then obtain whatever rank you bestow upon him. This is why I like you, Junko. You've always got the answers I want. Andromeda grinned and reached out as if to hug Junko to her side, but stopped when Junko flinched and closed her eyes. Power armor, right? You'd think I'd remember after 3 years. As they left the room, Devoros was shoved into motion. Where are we going? He asked. To the bridge of the ship, Junko answered, activating her translator. We've unlocked your nav computer. Captain Suvakov, Devoros began. Call me Baroness Andromeda, she interrupted. She wishes to plot a course through this sector of the galaxy and show her captains the path she wishes to take, Junko explained. And you're going to help her plot that course. Me? Why would I help you? Devoros asked. Because this ship holds the Crown Prince, Andromeda replied. His safety depends on the safety of this ship. If we keep running into Desvian patrols, I might not feel that keeping him alive is worth it. Or if we run afoul of some other dangers. In this sector, we might have to use him as a bargaining chip. Do you want that to happen? As they walked through the halls to the ship's tram system, Cookie began discussing the Desvians with Andromeda. Junko listened with interest. Meeting new aliens was always thrilling to her, though she wished their encounters were more peaceful. They're very interesting, Cookie explained. The most human-like creatures we've encountered yet, not just in appearance, but also in biology and anatomy. Their brains look like ours, he continued. Their organs function like ours. There are a few minor differences I can see already, and I'll likely find more after testing, but they're closer to us than any we've met before. What I find very interesting is their species seems to be on the cusp of splitting into separate subspecies. It's like their class or caste system is so rigid that they've nearly started branching off different evolutionary paths. You can tell, for example, that the captain here has commoner blood in him. Not a lot, so not his parents, but maybe grandparents. As they all looked at Devoros, the Desvian caught their gaze. What? What are you talking about? He says you aren't from a purely high-ranking family and that you've got a near ancestor who was from another class, Junko translated. Devoros shifted uncomfortably. My great-grandfather, my father's father's father, was a hero of the Tessus Verge. His wife was supposedly a countess from one of the annihilated families, the last survivor of her line. Since their blood library had been destroyed, they couldn't claim noble status anymore. But he loved her. and accepted her anyway. As a hero of such renown, no one questioned it. He paused. That's our story. She wasn't a noble. She was of common birth. She saved his life in the siege of Morellis, and they fell in love. That's sweet, Andromeda said with mock sincerity before continuing more seriously. But did you say blood library? Yes. All noble families must be able to trace their lineage back to the founding. You're a baroness. Do they not check? Andromeda and her lifeguards laughed at the question, confusing Devoros. We don't have titles like that, she explained. I just thought it sounded cool. Baroness? I'm a filthy pirate. What do I need a noble title for? Really, it's nothing but vanity. You can't just declare yourself a baroness, Devoros protested. Noble titles are passed by blood and tradition. To just call yourself one, that's not how it works. I'm fairly sure calling yourself one is exactly how you do it, Andromeda countered. If you call yourself some noble title and have the power to back it up, no one stops you. That's how kings get started. They say, I'm a king, and my army here will kill anyone who says otherwise. Then they marry women they've just declared to be nobles and start a messed-up, incestuous tradition that leads to decay and collapse. Junko noticed how shocked Devoros looked at Andromeda's description of monarchist systems. What are you anyway? An earl or a duke or something? Andromeda asked. No, I'm merely a lord. We're a very minor, low, noble family. Our only holdings come through naval service, which makes it hard to attract wives from the higher noble families, Devoros admitted, looking uncomfortable. As they boarded the tram that would take them to the bridge, walking the entire length of the massive ship would take hours. Junko checked her tablet. Captain Stahl and Blood Axe are waiting for you on the bridge, sir, she reported. Excellent. You really are amazing, Junko. I don't know if I could ever let you leave my side, Andromeda said, setting her hand on Junko's shoulder without crushing it, finally remembering to restrain herself while in the power armor. Junko glanced over at Devoros, wondering which of them was more the prisoner.